Okay, thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation to the seminar series. I'm a really big fan of PCI. You guys are doing fantastic work, and I really enjoy the seminar series. So it's nice to be invited to present in it. So today I'm going to present this website that I co-founded in 2012 and now run with Boris Barber, colleague here down the street. And just explain a little bit about the website, its motivation, and maybe a little bit of its impact. So I'm kind of assuming I was going to ask for a show of hands of people who have not heard of the website, but that's going to be kind of difficult in the Zoom. So I'm kind of assuming that most people at least have some experience with PubPeer. If not, feel free to post a question in the chat. Okay, so the website, the background for the website is it was kind of, well, very much inspired by the discussions that I was having in grad school about published research. Most of these discussions were in journal club setting, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes at conferences, but it seemed like pretty systematically, especially in journal clubs, that we were identifying perceived issues with articles. So often this was, in the journal club, this was minor stuff like this article doesn't seem like it belongs in Nature. But sometimes it was more consequential, like it seems like the statistics that were used here are not the appropriate statistics, and therefore maybe the conclusion is not valid. And really rarely that there was, something fundamentally wrong with the article. But these conversations were happening systematically. Basically, every article that we looked at in detail, we found some issue with. And I had several thoughts about that. One was, well, maybe if the authors were here in the journal club, they could help clarify some of these perceived issues that we have. Two, if not, then if these issues are real, then it's important that they are transmitted to people outside of the journal club. So there are many other people who are obviously interested in this article and potentially building research on it. And if we have identified a real issue with the article, it's important to get that out to those people who are interested in building on the research. And then I thought in grad school, this was the early 90s, or no, this was the late 90s, early 2000s. And I thought, well, where is the forum for discussing research? There's a forum for basically everything. Where's the research forum? And it didn't exist. And so I thought, well, this has to be created. Somewhere where we can just discuss scientists among scientists, science. Had the idea in grad school, and it wasn't until I was much later that I came across people that could actually build the website, and then together we built that website, which is PubPeer, and it's very simple. It's just a discussion forum for science. So I'd like to give one example of an article and how a problem with an article can have major effects in general. Granted, this is an extreme example, but I think it is illustrative. So this is the article from Timothy Wakefield that was published in The Lancet in 1998. And this article basically made a claim that there was a link between the measles, mumps, and rubella virus, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination and autism cases. The article was published in 1998, and shortly after, plotted in yellow here, is the number of patients that are getting, or the percentage of people that are getting the vaccination. You can see that there's a slight decrease here. And at the same time, there is an increase in the measles rates. Okay, so it was found very shortly after this article was published that there were problems with it. There were statistical problems. There were problems with the statistics in the data. And this information was known to kind of a small circle of people who are really interested in this article. But the article was not retracted until 2009. And so there were 11 years here where this information was kind of known by a circle of people, but the article was still out there and it was still used on social media to amplify this concern that vaccines are linked to autism. Concerned parents were hearing about this and faced with the decision: do I vaccinate my child with what I'm hearing on Facebook and other corners of the internet? Um, Giving this vaccination may cause my child to have autism, and so vaccination rates, as I showed, dropped and measles rates increased. Eventually, the article was retracted because of these issues with the data, but also because conflicts of interest with Timothy Wakefield were found. But as I said, that took 11 years, and the article caused major societal impact and is still having an impact with vaccination rates. So this is granted, like I said, kind of an extreme example. How prevalent are issues with the literature? In reality, we don't really know. What we do know is that there have been a few reports from pharmaceutical companies. There's one from Bayer in Germany, one from Amgen in the United States, saying that they were trying to build on primary research to create medications. And these are pharmaceutical companies who have a real interest in validating the research because they're trying to make a product based on that research. And they really want to be able to validate it so that they can make money on that product. Despite this motivation, Bayer said that they were only able to reproduce 33% of the primary research, and Amgen was only able to reproduce 11% of the research. So this is a really pitifully low percentage of the research, and pretty concerning that these pharmaceutical companies who really want to be able to replicate this failed. Several years ago, the head of the NIH at the time, Francis Collins, said in a report in Nature that the complex system for ensuring the reproducibility of biomedical research is failing and is in need of restructuring. So it seems that there is a problem with the published literature. What is the source of that problem? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that one of the main sources is that we all in the scientific community value the publication itself way more than what's inside the publication. So these silly little metrics to assess scientists and science, like the impact factor, whether the article is published in Science, Nature, and Cell, really overwhelms decisions on hiring and promotion of scientists. And what this does is it focuses the scientists' attention on getting data published in these journals and not necessarily publishing the most robust data. So this can take many forms. This can be an honest scientist in the lab who a student or a postdoc who has great data and sees an article in Science on the horizon, performs a control experiment that kind of invalidates that, and is forced with the decision: do I tell everybody about this control experiment, or do I just not tell them and publish the data in Science? This is a really difficult decision for a young scientist to make, considering what the rewards are that come with publishing in one of these high impact journals. So that's one example. Another extreme example is there's an entire industry right now of people generating fake publications that they're hoping nobody will ever read just to pad people's CVs. These are papermills that are just creating these articles just so that people can list them on their CVs and get a promotion or get a job. And so these incentives are really twisted and are not helpful for creating solid science. And that's probably the reason that we have these issues in the published research. And so the major goal of PubPeer from the beginning was to focus attention away from where something is published, the metrics involved in it, and put it directly on the content of the article that is published. So I'll just give a brief description for those who have not come across PubPeer of what the site is. This is the front page of PubPeer. There is a search bar here where you can put in a keyword, search for articles in a domain, search for an author, search for keywords, and see what other people are discussing. And they will be listed here. This is the default of the most recent comments that have been selected by moderators for having a unique discussion to them. That's the front page. And then we also have what we call the fire hose, which is all recent comments. If you click on this link here, these are not the selected comments, but just everything that's coming in. And if you come and you want to leave a comment on an article, you don't find it in the database because nobody's left a comment yet, you can just paste the DOI or the PubMed ID, any serial number from the article, and PubPeer will go out and bring that article in so you can leave the first comment on that article. If we click on one of the examples here, we bring up what a comment thread looks like. So it has obviously the title and the journal of the article being discussed, list of authors. And here is the first comment of this particular article that was left in February 2025. What you will notice is that the username here is not somebody's name. This is a pseudonym assigned from the Tree of Life. So if somebody wants to write an anonymous comment, they can on PubPeer. This has typically been the most controversial aspect of PubPeer. This has died down now that people have gotten used to anonymous commenting, and we see that there are very few unproductive comments from anonymous users. So it's become a little bit less controversial than it was when we first launched the website. And so this anonymous commenter came here in February 2025 and left the first comment on this article. What that did is you see these green check marks here. That means that we have an email address on file for these authors. Either we got it off of the PDF or a user, when they submitted the comments, supplied email addresses that we verified. And so when the comment was left, this sent an email to the authors so that the authors could come back and respond to the comment, which is what happened here in this discussion. Shortly after the comment was left, one of the authors came back and left a clarifying comment here. And so this sets up a conversation, in this case, between an anonymous commenter and the author to discuss the details of the article. So yes, comments are anonymous, and this is something that we kind of struggled with at the beginning of launching PubPeer. When we first launched the site, we didn't allow, well, we had anonymous comments, but we had to verify that it was from an actual person with an institutional address. But we met a lot of resistance to this approach, and people said, we don't even want you to know who we are. We want to leave comments completely anonymously. This kind of made sense. I'll explain later that there are risks, even if you identify yourself to us. If you are alerting people to misconduct, that can become a legal issue, and authors may not like that you have exposed their misconduct and could try to silence you by taking a legal case. And so if even we don't know who you are, then we cannot be subpoenaed for that information. Okay, so users wrote to us and wanted this fully anonymous commenting, and we kind of thought about it and really hesitated because we had seen what had happened on YouTube, where comments are completely anonymous, and thought, is this a good idea or not? We decided that comments on PubPeer are different than comments on cat videos on YouTube because this is the scientific literature, and comments are supposed to convince other scientists, are supposed to make an argument that convinces other scientists. And we thought, well, maybe since this is a different target audience, commenting will be more productive. And we also built in a set of guidelines for anonymous commenting. The most important being that comments are heavily moderate or strictly moderated to abide by these guidelines. And the first one is that the comment has to be publicly verifiable. So this has to be something factual, usually something in the article, like take a look at figure 2C. I see a problem with figure 2C here, here, and here. Everybody can see that, and that is publicly verifiable. And that kind of focuses the conversation on the data. And so if we moderate comments and we enforce that one critical guideline, we now find that I am confident in saying 99% of the comments on PubPeer, and let's see, what is the denominator of that? And at the moment, there are 350,000 comments on PubPeer. So I would say that the vast majority of them are productive comments about science because we are enforcing this publicly verifiable criteria. So comments are moderated. We have a small moderation team. So comments are not moderated for science because the moderators are not experts in all scientific domains. And the moderation is mostly just to enforce our guidelines. Other things that we've built in are their facilities for reporting abuse. So next to every comment, there are two important buttons. One to report if you see a problem. The community of PubPeer users has grown and has become pretty tight knit. And the users are very good at policing these comments. And they have a real interest in doing this because they are using PubPeer. They want PubPeer to be known as a productive place for discussion. They don't want unproductive comments on the site because that takes away from the impact of their comments. So they will use the report button to signal to us that something doesn't belong there if by chance it's passed through moderation. The other important button is that there is a reply button where authors can immediately reply and defend the comment or write a defense to the original comment. We allow images, so we allow people to show original data to clarify any issues that have come up. And as I said, there's this community surveillance. So with these safeguards, I'm very confident in saying that the vast majority of comments on PubPeer are productive, and issues that that scientists building on the research, as well as publishers who've published this data, are interested in. Okay, so I started out by showing this nice discussion of data on the website, which is what ultimately is one use of PubPeer. Another use of PubPeer, which is now the overwhelming use of PubPeer, is to point out fundamental problems with the data. And this is an example of this sort of issue. So these are comments just pointing at an image in an article and showing that, okay, this particular Western blot image, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but I'm trying to highlight C2 in the upper left corner. And if you follow the kind of purplish arrow down to the bottom right corner, you'll see that that gel looks very similar to the one in the upper left. And in fact, most of these gels are similar to each other. So the authors have assembled this article from a set of Western blots and are representing different conditions with the same images. Okay. And this is a very often a use case of the website, and there have become a community of sleuths, too numerous to name them all. So I will just highlight the most famous, which is Elizabeth Bick, who points out, who has a great eye for identifying these things, and is very consistently accurate at pointing out these sort of image issues. And one of the places that she posts this is on PubPeer. So this is an interesting article to point out because this is another article that is claiming to point to evidence between a link of vaccines and autism. And I like showing this example because this article was published in September of 2017. The first comment on PubPeer appeared on September 2017, and this was one of the comments, and there were others showing other issues in this data. And the article was retracted the next month on October 10th. So this article was not able to exist in the literature for 11 years and be armed by concerned parents as a reason not to vaccinate their children. It was basically immediately removed from the literature. And I feel that's a major success of PubPeer in that having a public conversation highlighting these issues clearly put pressure to act more swiftly on this article than was shown previously with other anti-vaccine articles. So just a few stats from the website. So we launched it in 2012, and you can see this is a trend of comments over year. It's growing and growing. We now have over 340,000 comments on the website. And these are the number of comments per month that we receive on the site. This kind of demonstrates the ratio between the anonymous comments in light gray and comments from signed users in dark gray. So both are increasing. That ratio seems to be roughly the same as it always was. And as I kind of pointed out, I think there's good reasons for users wanting to post their comments anonymously, because there can be major repercussions for an honest comment just pointing out problems with research. This can be an extreme example of somebody taking somebody suing somebody for doing this, but it can also have more subtle effects. For example, if a scientist points out another scientist's error, the person who committed the error may not be happy that was pointed out publicly, and may have an opportunity to review the other scientist's grants, papers, and do that anonymously, and could retaliate against that user that way. And so I think a lot, especially younger scientists, are choosing to comment anonymously to avoid those sorts of repercussions. And this is a post or a plot of the comments from authors over time. That's growing. The ratio seems to be similar to the overall comment ratio. So I don't think we're necessarily getting more proportion of author comments, but as more comments grow, we get more author comments. So the other stat that I would like to point out, this is analysis done by Boris, my colleague with whom I run the website. Um, he used the Retraction Watch database and looked at the date of retraction of an article. And then we compared that to the date of first comment on PubPeer from the same article. And he found that 19% of retracted articles had at least one PubPeer comment prior to their retraction. So it does seem like these comments, especially the image manipulation comments, are having an effect. People are noticing, and it is helping to clean up the literature. So that's one way of using the website, is to point out these fundamental issues. Um, And I think that's a major contribution. And if we stop there, I will be satisfied with the contribution of PubPeer. But I think it could do a lot. It could have a much bigger effect. If the reflex of all scientists was that after reading an article, they went and had a public discussion of that article and pointed out journal club comments, or whatever impression they had of that article, I believe that that body of evaluation would be used by evaluators just as much, if not more, than the metrics associated with that article. If I was on a review committee and I knew that somebody who was applying for a position, if I knew that there was a database that gave me other scientists' impression of the work of these candidates, I would eat that up. I would use that way more than has this person published in Science, Nature, Cell. And so I think as a community, we have an opportunity to present that body of evaluation to evaluators, and it will be used. And if we do that, maybe we can stop this silly use of impact factors for judging science and our careers and use our community evaluation of the science. So in at the end of last year, PubPeer won an award from the Einstein Foundation that came with a 200,000 euro award to the foundation. And we have decided to make awards to try to incentivize these types of discussions that we think could really change the way science is evaluated. And so every month we're giving away $1,000 for a comment that adds something to an article. And we feel, well, so we started this in January. We see, if you look at the front page of PubPeer, these are the kind of highlighted comments. These are the ones that win the award. We see this list growing much faster. And we think that the reason for that is $1,000 is, a king sum for an undergrad, a graduate student, or a postdoc. And so there's real incentive for writing. It's a simple thing to do to write a comment on PubPeer. Um, Go to a journal club, and this is some of the first winners. People have kind of synthesized what was discussed in a journal club, put that on PubPeer, and we awarded them $1,000. And so we see that this is having an effect, and like to encourage all young scientists to participate in this. And if it's successful, we could imagine doing this more than monthly. Um, okay, so we're incentivizing those comments to build that body of evaluation. The other thing that we're doing is we have created what we call dashboards. So these is basically an alerting service that institutions, journals, publishers, et cetera, can subscribe to. And then those institutions can receive an alert anytime an author has listed their institution on a paper, and that paper is discussed on PubPeer. So this is a great way to keep tabs on what authors at an institution, publisher, or journal are being commented on PubPeer. And well, so maybe I skip ahead. Well, I'll just come back to that in a second. The other thing that we have done is we have created browser add-ons. These are just tiny pieces of code that you can install on in your browser. We have them for all major browsers. If you go to PubPeer, you can find links to install these things. And these things are nice because this little piece of code basically does nothing except if an article on the page has a discussion on PubPeer, then one of these green boxes shows up to say this paper has been discussed on PubPeer. If you're interested in the discussion, just click on this and you can see what people are saying about the paper. So it's a great way to be alerted to discussions on PubPeer in many different places. So they'll appear on the journal website, they'll appear on PubMed or Google Scholar, and for young scientists, it also appears on lab websites. So if you're interested in joining a lab, if you go and look at the publications on the lab website, often the PubPeer browser add-on will tell you if some of the articles on the lab website have been discussed on PubPeer, and this can help inform your decision on whether or not you want to really join that lab. Like I said, it's also on PubMed. Okay, so the website is run by, at the moment, a 501c3 nonprofit in California, which has a board of directors of myself and Boris and Ivan Oransky from Retraction Watch. It's a very small operation. It's meant to be by the community for the community. But there are some costs. We pay developers, we have legal fees, and those costs at the moment are paid by awards like the Einstein Foundation. But also those subscriptions I mentioned to the dashboards, we collect a small fee for those subscriptions. So many journals, publishers, and institutes will subscribe to these alerting services, and that's what funds the PubPeer Foundation and ultimately the development and maintenance of the website. So I think I've covered everything here, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have some.
Thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. We will now take questions from the audience, and we'll end this session at 5 p.m. So we have about 23 minutes. So if you have questions, you can write them in the chat, and I will be reading the first ones. So we have a question from Denis. Has PubPeer ever been sued by authors or publishers for defamation or for claiming, rightly or wrongly, that the criticisms were unfounded and caused negative consequences for the authors or publishers? If so, what are the outcomes of these legal proceedings?
Great question, and something I should add to my presentation. So we have now comments on, what did I say, 12,000 different journals in 350,000 comments on 150,000 different papers. And we have been directly sued 0 times. There was a case in 2015 where a researcher had articles commented on PubPeer, and they subpoenaed us for user information about that user. This was before we changed, and was one of the reasons why we changed the system so that we cannot have any of that information. We did have some of that information at the time. We fought that subpoena and ultimately won and did not hand over any information about the users. We occasionally receive legal threats from people saying they're going to sue us, but we have never been taken to court. Knock on wood, and hopefully I don't give any interest in people now starting to take those cases. But we have not received those suits, and I think that's in a large part due to the fact that comments on PubPeer are moderated to be factual and centered on the data. And truth is a defense for defamation, and we don't allow hearsay or or defamatory comments on the website. And as I said before, I'm very confident that we have very little, if any, of that on the site. Thanks for the great question. I'd love to be able to read the questions as they come in, but maybe I have to
Would you like
stop
to
my.
read the next one?
No, I mean, I no, you can read them, but I just wanted to like have advanced warning of them as
Oh,
they're coming
sure.
in.
Yeah. Someone else was asking a related question about potential copyright issues, reproduction of images in the papers, I guess.
So we've never had any issue with that. It's mostly fair use. We're showing data from the article, and most of that is fair use. So we've never had anyone. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've never had any like legitimate claims of copyright use. We do occasionally have an author saying, "This is my paper. How dare you comment this online? Take it down. It's copyright issue." But that's never got even close to a lawyer's letter for something like that. And it's hard to see that it would be able to because these are data that people have published to be discussed.
Okay. So a question from Francois. Pointing issues in data is great, but isn't it too easy now to correct databases post-publication through versioning? Open access databases can be corrected without necessarily telling the world that a previous paper based on this database was not correct.
I'm not sure I follow. You mean the figure has changed or the data has changed between when it was published and when it was commented? Could the commenter clarify the question, or did somebody else understand the question differently than I did?
Uh, yes, sorry, it was probably unclear. The idea is if you publish with a certain database, then actually the database could be wrong at the time of publication, but afterward you correct it, but you have no incentive except maybe like real pressure from the publisher, but otherwise to actually correct the paper. So you could actually let the paper stand by and just have the database corrected. It's at least something, but I guess it's a bit of a problem if people rely on the actual result from the publication.
Yeah, but usually there's a trace, there's a repository, and you can see a trace of the change in data, isn't there?
Yeah, but especially if there are like strings of errors, then it's difficult. I mean, you really have to dig in to see what was exactly the version at the moment of the publication. So, I mean, my comment is more about like the fact that it's becoming more and more difficult to actually dig to the point where the paper was published, what was the state of the database, and like most people won't actually dig. That's the thing.
I see. Yeah, I
Mm.
guess that's true.
Okay. Maybe I'll just move on to someone else's question and then we can go back to Francois' second question. Marjolaine was asking, did you notice fake comments generated by AI?
We haven't seen a lot of that yet. It's Well, I mean, we don't think we've seen a lot of that. So we do moderate comments to be factual, and it's going to be slightly difficult for an AI to generate a legitimate critique of an article that's going to pass moderation. We've kind of see hints of this, maybe people trying to do this, but it's for the moment it's been so obvious that we've been able to moderate it out. But yeah, obviously that is going to be a concern for the future.
Okay. So the cost of retraction is mostly fed by the junior scientists. Do you track serial bad science by the same silverbacks in order to stop the production of bad science by groups led by senior PIs?
Well, we're not tracking any of the scientists. These are the commenters on the site that are leaving these comments. We're not we're not sanctioning any of these comments ourselves. But my feeling from looking at the community that's developed is that they're interested in the science and not the scientists. And they do the ones that, the comments that I have seen do definitely hold the senior PI's feet to the fire more than the younger researchers. That answer the question?
Oh, yes. Karen was asking, so some articles are listed on the PubPeer site, but with no comments. Why is this?
Well, so some comments, someone has searched for that article for some reason, and so that's brought it into the system, but there's no comment left on the article. Eventually, the system's going to come around again and see that there were no comments and remove that article. But we don't see it as an issue that it's listed on PubPeer with no comments. I understand that some people are sensitive to that, but I think that if we analyze that a little bit more, it's going to be hard for anyone to make a legitimate argument against an article or a researcher saying, well, it's on PubPeer with zero comments. I don't see that argument swaying very many people.
Sarah was saying, thank you for the talk. The idea of the incentives is very good, but why not rewarding also those who take into account useful comments and amend or retract their paper?
Yeah, for sure. I think that having this entire conversation public, that will also be valued as well. I mean, if evaluation committees see the entire timeline of how an issue came to light and how the authors reacted to that, I think that will be of great value to evaluation committees in the future. Instead of just the label retracted, if we can see how that came about, I think that if somebody did the right thing and retracted it on themselves, evaluation committees will favor that.
I meant monetary incentives. Sorry, yeah, the same. The person was hinting at monetary incentives for retracting or amending the paper.
Yeah, I mean, we could start paying authors for retracting their articles. I could see potential issues with that. I think, it's something to consider down the road, but for the moment, we're going to focus on incentivizing the evaluation.
Okay, another question from Rafael. Thanks for your talk and the work done on PubPeer. Sometimes colleagues contributing to PubPeer are facing aggression. Things can turn very dark. I'm thinking, for example, what Elizabeth Bick has faced in the last year. I wonder what resources PubPeer has to support colleagues in this type of situation. I also wonder if you have statistics about articles with fundamental problems identified in PubPeer that have not been retracted.
I guess we do have stats on that. So there are 347,000 comments on PubPeer. The last time I looked, well, actually, the better number is there's 157,000 papers on PubPeer the last time I looked, which is like a few days ago. And if you know PubPeer, you know that the vast majority of the comments on those articles are critical. And we have not seen anywhere near 157,000 retractions. So most comments, most articles have a comment and are not retracted. Hopefully that's changing, and hopefully we'll get more retracted articles. But at the moment, most things are not being retracted. For the first part of your question, what resources do we have to protect commenters? How to say this? We would, if somebody has a legitimate issue, please contact us. We're very interested in helping, if we can, doing what we can to help commenters. And I think most of the time we are aware of these issues, and we would be willing to help if we could, for sure.
So another question from Johannes. What do you think might be PubPeer's effect on error culture in science? For
On what
instance,
culture?
in error
Oh, okay.
culture in science. So for instance, some people discussed on PubPeer um, Some claim PubPeer comments enforce a blame culture, especially the anonymous ones.
Well, so we don't allow blame on PubPeer. That's not those sorts of comments are just not allowed on the website. You can only point out the error. You can't make some guess of why the error came about. Um, but I do, like I said in response to the other question about incentivizing retractions, I do think that having these conversations out in the public does help. It gives everybody more information to evaluate the nature of these comments.
A question from Bruno. So the way publication problems are reported needs to be done carefully. Governments are using the current trends of criticism, often valid, of science to say science is not good, I will slash funding and I will recommend anti-science actions. Let us not be too candid when criticizing science. I guess that was more of a comment than a
Yeah,
question.
but I think it's a great comment, and something that does come up a lot. So we do have the choice of showing the public and our funders two options when there is a problem with data. That the scientific community has recognized that problem and has come together to address it, or that we're just going to kind of turn our face away from it and ignore it because we want to protect science by doing that. I think ultimately the public and funders will find out about that second option, and it will do way more harm than us as a scientific community saying, look, we're making science stronger by finding these problems and correcting them.
Thomas was asking, is the list of subscribers public? This gives information about the institutions.
It's not. Obviously some subscribers don't want that information to be public, and we respect that.
Michael is saying, in a certain way, PubPeer is filling a gap left by journals that used to include sections for letters to the editor. That section is rare nowadays. Do you think journals should give more space to that kind of permanent review process, or is it outdated and better suited to platforms like PubPeer?
More commentary everywhere would be great. That's only going to be helpful for science.
A question from Lisa. From what I understood, it seems that PubPeer is mainly used for negative comments, but are there instances where a paper receives positive or endorsing comments?
Great question. So you're right that most of the comments on PubPeer are critical. I think my interpretation for that, which you can decide if you agree with, is that in the culture that we have right now, where most things are published, I'm excluding preprints for the moment because I think preprints are a different category. But stuff that is published, we live in a culture where we have to publish everything in the highest impact factor journal that we can. So scientists are constantly putting the best possible spin on their research to get it in the next journal. How many conversations have we been a part of where we tell a colleague that we have this new paper that we're thinking about publishing, and the first question is, where are you going to publish it? And so we're all thinking about getting this in the best possible journal. And this causes us authors to put the best possible spin on the data. And so it already has that badge of it's of this level because it's published in this journal. And there's usually only one direction for that article to go, which is down. There's very little incentive for people to come in and say, I think this article is even better than what the authors have already said. This is just rare. However, hopefully this changes as we start moving towards a evaluation or posting our data on preprint servers and evaluating that collectively on preprint servers. Then there's a real need for the community to say, look, I've read this article and I think it's great. So I think that as we transition, and I do see that as the future is transitioning to more of a discussion-based evaluation, we will see more positive comments. The other issue that I like to highlight with positive comments is that an anonymous comment, an anonymous positive comment is worthless, right? That's going to be me commenting on my own article, or my lovely mother pointing out how wonderful my work is. It's rarely going to be a colleague saying, "I anonymously think your article is fantastic."
A question from Alain. How much time does it take to the board to handle such a website? Half time, full time?
We're doing this all in our part-time. And we'll see if we can keep that up. For now, that is the way that we operate. And we like having our those two aspects of life, PubPeer and science, and we love to keep doing that. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Richard is asking, can you explain a little bit more about how the institutional alerts work?
So let's use a fake example of so we have institutional, publisher, and journal alerts, or we can configure other things. If you're talking specifically about institutional alerts, an institute, like for example, I don't know, whatever, University of X, can subscribe, and for their subscription they have to pay a yearly fee to us, and then they have a dashboard where they can look at all articles by authors who have listed University of X on their article. And then whenever a new article a new comment appears on an article that lists that institute, then the institute, whoever has subscribed, usually that's the integrity office, will receive an alert to that. We have now recently added an API so that they can build that into their systems, and their evaluation systems can directly integrate PubPeer comments into it. Was that your question, Richard? Uh-oh, he's muted.
No, I couldn't unmute. Yeah, it was my question. My question was how, I mean, if an institution has an institutional subscription, I figure that, but how do you know the papers are from that institution, given that not every journal uses RORs and institutional affiliations are notoriously noisy in papers? So how do you how can you be sure an institution is alerted to anything that's come from their institution? Will there be false negatives, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there will be there's likely to be false negatives. We're limited to the metadata that comes in from on the paper, and we have had occasional examples of institutes saying, "Wait a minute, I know this thing has a comment. Why haven't we received an alert to it?" The instances that I'm thinking of, the affiliation data was correct, but the person was at a different institute when they published the paper. And so that the new institute was not listed on the article. See what I mean? I mean, maybe you have different experience, but our experience with the metadata is that the affiliation information at the time of publication is very accurate.
Okay. So we have time for one last question. So I'm going to read the one from someone who hasn't asked the question yet. Pinar, I see several papers without any author email listed, meaning authors were probably not aware of the criticism or questions raised for their paper, although they have publicly available contact information. Is there a possibility to make submission of authors' emails possible for everyone, so that authors can be alerted and join the conversation about their papers, and also get a chance to clarify if these comments may be considered in their evaluations?
Absolutely. I mean, at least there used to be. I think there's still a button on the website that says suggest an author email.
Okay. Okay, I ask Thomas' question. Since we still have 1 minute, isn't it possible to implement a tool similar to the web browser add-on directly in the native code of search engines, such as Google Scholar or Web of Science or PubMed? It would be super efficient. And a related question, any stats on the use of the add-on?
I don't have stats on the use of the add-on available. I mean, we must have stats somewhere, and I can share those. So why don't we do this on Google? We explicitly remove it from Google because we had major publishers who decided that they weren't going to take out a subscription, which we need to fund the site. Instead, they were just going to search for their institute on Google and use the browser add-on to let them know when there were articles on there. So we had to remove it from Google, unfortunately. You know, one of our goals, if we would love to open the database and make it available and not have to charge these subscriptions. We would love to be able to do that. But there are, we do have costs to keep the site developed and running. And so the only funding model that we've come up with are these subscriptions. If somebody wanted, our running costs are not huge. And so if somebody, wanted to make a major donation that we could then use to keep the site running, just invest that and use that donation and as an investment and then run off the interest, we would welcome that. But no billionaires have come forward to make a major investment in PubPeer yet. We would love to make all the data open and share it with everybody. That is a goal for the future, but we have to then find a different revenue model.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. So it's 5 p.m., so we are supposed to stop unless Brandon wants to answer more questions. I don't know, we can take a few more minutes if you want, but we can also stop there.
I'm enjoying it. I don't mind to answer a few more questions.
Okay, then
I don't want to do this all night. Maybe we set 5:15.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go back to some that I haven't asked. There was one from Francois. How can PubPeer tackle the bad paper industry to come with open access databases plus AI LLM? For instance, letting the AI do the data mining and only taking what's working. More generally, p-hacking, trying all possible tests of every possible relationship in the data. Using AI is a process that will generate tons of papers on the same data set. Is there a way at PubPeer to detect the overuse of a given database? And thus to link the comments on the different papers in order to evince this issue across a potentially large cluster of paper? So that's a long question.
I do think that having humans read the articles and write their comments is going to be a good way of battling against artificial intelligence generated articles. I think that we're going to have to find ways to fight the artificial intelligence that will be used for creating comments on PubPeer. We have ideas for that, and I think there are ways, at least in the short or medium term, of defending against that. For p-hacking, running every possible test, this is happening all the time, and these discussions, people do notice this and do comment this on PubPeer. So this is a current use of the website right now.
I have a question about AI also. I was wondering whether you use AI for moderation, or is this just humans screening the comments?
At the moment, PubPeer is by humans for humans.
Okay.
We could imagine using AI for some of the moderation in limited use. We're far from that right now. We're doing okay with humans doing it. And we're going to try to we want humans reading the comments and moderating the comments. We're going to try to stick with that for as long as possible.
Okay. Didier was asking, what is the rate of unpublished comments, the ones that don't pass moderation? Did it change through time? Are author replies also moderated? And if so, are some not passing moderation?
Excellent questions. We definitely have stats on unmoderated comments. I don't have those in front of me. I can give you some impressions without hard numbers that the community has understood our guidelines and are making comments that abide by the guidelines more and more. And so my feeling is that if we look at the percentage of moderated comments, that's probably decreasing. We still moderate. There's still new users, so there's still comments that we have to moderate. And what was the other part of that question that I forgot?
So did it change through time?
Yeah, that kind of answered that. But there was another aspect to that. It has changed through time. We don't have the hard numbers. I've lost it. Oh, do we moderate authors' comments? So that does happen. It's rare because it's signed. So if an author wants to say something crazy, we often let them. But sometimes it's a little bit too much, or it's attacking someone, or we just don't want the author to get themselves in too much trouble. So we do moderate authors' comments, but you're right, it's more rare than other comments.
Question from Pinar. When a comment is rejected, is there a practice of giving feedback about why the comment was rejected? Like when reviewers explain why a paper is rejected. I see discussions on this topic, and giving feedback may help commenters to improve and feel encouraged.
Absolutely a great remark, and something that we want to build in a little bit better into future versions of the website. At the moment, if somebody so when you write an anonymous comment, you're assigned this anonymous username from the tree of life, and you're given a secret code that only you have, and you can come back and claim that same username. And if you do that, when you log in the second time, if your comment is moderated, and if the moderators feel like the comment can be improved, there can be a note from the moderator saying this is why it was moderated, and this is what you could do to improve that comment so that it appears. You can only see that if you keep your username and come back and log in with the same account. Otherwise, that information is not publicly public-facing.
A question from Mathieu. In your opinion, is the usefulness of PubPeer lower for preprint than published articles? Because preprint is usually not a final version. Also, do you see how we could optimize or partly merge the use of PubPeer and PCI, or think they should remain independent?
I am a firm believer that more commentary everywhere is a good thing. I would be very happy to have more integration between the two platforms. And no, I don't think that PubPeer is less useful for preprints. I think there's less motivation from the community to use it right now because we do not have this culture of community assessment. We have more of a culture of this article is published in a journal. I think I see a problem with it. I'm unhappy, and I'm going to write a comment on it. And there's less of let's come together and assess this preprint to either increase its value or to point out errors with it. But as the commentary increases, if we all build towards creating this body of commentary, that second use case is just going to grow. And we're looking, in addition to giving this financial incentive, we're also looking at building features into PubPeer that allow users to take a little bit more credit and to show off their contribution to this assessment. And we hope that, though that will also incentivize more people participating in this type of commentary, because it has to happen. And if it does, it's going to be a complete shift in the way that we evaluate science and publish science for the better. My personal opinion.
Okay, I think that answered also Michelle's question. So she said, I just gave a talk in a peer review training program in which I referred to PubPeer as a post-publication peer review platform, but it's obviously played a unique, somewhat adversarial role here. So how do you think of the role of PubPeer relative to other peer review platforms like PCI, peer review, etc.?
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the comments saying that this is an example of an author retracted comment. I started reading that. Could you repeat the
question was, so I gave a talk in a peer review training program in which I referred to PubPeer as a post-publication peer review platform, but it has obviously played a unique role here. So how do you think of the role of PubPeer relative to other peer review platforms like PCI, peer review, etc.?
I think the more the merrier. It's good that we have as much community review as possible. I'm not sure that answered the question. You want more clarification? I'm trying to find the Sudoff comment that was moderated. I don't find it. Well, so I think the more community evaluation is better. So I see this last comment here. This is an example of an author's comment that was moderated, number 16. Okay, let's go to number 16. Well, I don't know if I want to comment specifically on a specific comment, but that particular thread did devolve into name calling and was not particularly productive. I haven't found the exact comment to give you details about that specific comment, but I can tell you in general, those conversations, the vast majority of the author's comments, as you can see, have been approved. There may have been a few that were, calling the commenters names or something like that, that we said, okay, well, this is enough.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. So I suggest that we stop there. Thanks again, everyone, for attending the webinar and for your questions. And thank you again, Brandon, for your presentation and the really interesting discussion. Before you leave, please mark on your agenda that the next PCI webinar will take place in September 18th, and the speaker will be Dorothy Bishop. She's an important voice on the topic of scientific integrity, and she will talk about how negligent publishers subvert quality control in scientific publishing. The abstract will soon be available on the PCI webinar webpage, and the registrations will be open in August. Have a nice summer, everyone, and see you in September.